Now, the conform is the part of the grade most people don't mention or even think about. It's absolutely vital, though. The conform allows you to migrate your edit from your choice of editing software, such as Premiere Pro, Final Cut, or Avid, into Resolve. The conform starts with what we call the pre-grade. That's a final pass of the offline edit to get things in order, a kind of spring cleaning that will make progressing our project to the grade and online edit much easier and more efficient. We then go through one of two kinds of workflow. We can render out a single file and then cut it back into chunks to reflect the placement of all of our cuts in the edit. This is called the baked master workflow. It's actually very easy to do and much more practical than that short description might suggest. Alternatively, we can use what we call a round-trip workflow. This is typically the use of an XML or AAF to import raw files or rushes into Resolve and populate an edit timeline to make it identical to our offline edit. A perfect conform, and this usually comes from proof checking and fixing a flawed conform, is essential, as without one we cannot continue with the grade. The way we grade, we deliver graded media back to our client. We're not going to be going through a dailies workflow in this course. That means if our timeline in Resolve is off, we will be sending the wrong footage back to our client, and that is totally unacceptable. We're going to take a look at a few basic things before we jump into this, so click on through to the next lecture once you're ready. The first thing we're going to see when we open up a project in Resolve is the cut panel. Now, we're not going to use the cut panel in this course. What we want to do is we want to go to the media panel. So down here we have a series of icons, and the one on the far left is the media panel. We're simply going to left click on this icon. And here we are at the media panel. This is our first port of call when working in Resolve. This is where we can import media directly into Resolve, check over everything in the project, look at our metadata, and generally skim through what we've got to work with before moving on. The center screen here is our media viewer. This shows us the currently active frame of whatever clip we have actively selected, whether that clip has been imported into Resolve or if it's still floating around in our storage somewhere. To the left of this, we have our file hierarchy dialog. This allows us to search through our system in the same way as Windows Explorer or Mac Finder. I can click onto a drive, I can then click onto a folder, and I can navigate into a folder that contains footage. You will be working with this project a bit later on. If I click on a file and select it, I see the first frame in our media viewer here in the center, and I can drag this playhead around in order to scrub through that clip. Below these two, we have our bins, and this is our general workspace in the media panel. We can import clips into this workspace, and we can do that by just dragging and dropping into the space here. Or I can Control or Command or Shift click to select multiple clips and do the same. The most effective way of importing many clips at once is to select a folder, right-click, and choose Add Folders and Subfolder into Media Pool. That will look at everything in that folder and every folder contained within and add all viable footage items into our bin all at once. To the left of this central lower space, we have our bin list. This contains all the bins we've created, and these work very much in the same way as bins in any other non-linear editor. One difference is the presence of the master bin. Everything is contained within this bin. It's the top level of the folder hierarchy we construct whilst working. Other NLEs have the same top level, but it's not usually displayed like this. So if you want to see everything from the top down, click on the master bin, and that will show you everything, or every other bin you have in your project that is not nested within another bin. Now, on the right hand side, we have a viewer that can show us a number of different things, and it's only active when we have a clip properly selected. By default, it shows us metadata, and this is super important. Metadata is a collection of information that tells us important things about our footage, things like codec, bit depth, frame rate, and more. Metadata can get very advanced and involved, so we're not going to dwell on it for now, but we know where to find it. We can also view audio information here by clicking Audio and choosing between meters and waveform. So in the very top right, I have Audio, Metadata, and Inspector. We have Capture, which we're going to ignore. I can click on Audio, and I've removed the audio from this clip so we get nothing there, but we can then see the audio meters here, or I can go to an audio waveform. Now, this has been a good and brief introduction to the media panel. As we work, we'll use its features and go over them in more detail, but this will be enough for us to move on and get on into the Conform. In the next lecture, we're going to go over the Edit panel, and then we're going to go ahead and get on with the Conform. So click on through to the next lecture once you're ready. The Edit panel is where we can carry out a full edit within Resolve. In order to reach the Edit panel, we use the icons at the bottom of the screen, and the icon that looks like some stacked bars with a vertical strike running through them is the one we're after. This is where we can take a look at the structure of our timeline, perform any necessary editing tasks, such as making titles invisible whilst we grade, and so forth. This panel is a fully featured editing solution, and you can actually perform your entire edit within Resolve. This is becoming increasingly popular, and it's an excellent tool if you're looking for a free editing solution, and in a number of ways it does also outperform Premiere Pro. We're going to take a look around and familiarise ourselves with the Edit panel before moving on to an example Conform. So first, we have our two viewers. On the left here, we have the source viewer, and on the right, we have the program monitor. Now, my source viewer is currently empty because I don't have a clip in my media pool selected. So if I go into my rushes folder here, and I've brought something in for demo purposes, we're going to go into how to bring all of this in properly a little bit later on. If I select a clip by double clicking, it will appear in the source viewer. Once it's here, I can just drag the playhead around and check it end to end, just like in any other NLE. And on the right, we have the program monitor, which will show us what's going on in our current edit, in our timeline below. Now, on the far left, we have our media pool, which we just saw. This is the same as the media pool and bin list from the media panel, containing everything we've imported so far and maintaining that folder hierarchy. Just like any other NLE, we can drag and drop from the media pool onto our timeline. So I can just take this clip, and there we go. And we can also set our in points and out points using the source viewer. The shortcuts are I and O, just like in any other editing program. So let's say I want to take an example of this clip, set my in, set my out, and drag down, and there we go. If you've used any editing software before, and I'm guessing that's likely since you're on a color grading course, then this is all going to be very familiar. Above our media pool, we have the options for the effects library, which contain all of our video and audio effects and transitions. This is just like the effects bin in Premiere Pro or Final Cut. And if I click it, we get a lower window down here, and all of our video transitions, audio, titles, IBU generators, for example, and then effects are in here, and we apply them just by dragging and dropping them onto a clip. And I can just click that again to get rid of it. Now up in the top right, we have the inspector, an icon that looks like a spanner and a paintbrush. And this is a lot like the motion effects in Premiere Pro. It allows us to pan and scan, crop and transform our image, as well as change its blend mode if it's on top of another clip in the timeline. And we have composite mode here, and I can just choose all of these different blends if I'm setting up a blend. We also have our metadata panel as well, just in case we have to double check any of our metadata. Now this has just been a quick whistle stop to say this is here and that's there. We're going to go through anything that becomes practically relevant to our grade as we go through the demonstrations which are coming up. So click on through to the next lecture once you're ready. Okay. This one's going to be important. This is a short and sweet topic, but I wanted to give it its own video. That way you can reference this whenever you need to. We're going to take a look at the clip attributes dialog in the edit panel. When I was starting out, I had a number of projects produce errors that I didn't understand, and the key to finding out what was wrong lay in the clip attributes. This is not totally dissimilar to the interpret footage settings in Premiere Pro. Here we have a number of ways we can tell Resolve to interpret our footage if we are facing problems. So in order to get to this menu, I'm just going to right-click on a clip that I have selected and choose Clip Attributes. And that will expose the Clip Attributes window. First we have the frame rate, which is fairly basic. We can set the frame rate of individual clips if we're working with mixed frame rate material. Next, we have data levels, and this is the important one, and we need to keep this in mind for later. Setting your data levels incorrectly either during import or export can produce either a washed out image or an image where the contrast is too high and has gone crazy. We will cover this in detail when we talk about final delivery later in the course, but if you find yourself needing to change video or data levels during your edit or during your project, you do so with these controls here. Next, we have pixel aspect ratio. On a small number of projects, I've had this cause issues, usually when a client doesn't know they're using a non-square pixel aspect ratio. You'll know this is causing issues because your image will be weirdly distorted and the proportions of everything will look wrong. If that's the case, then you can set this setting in the master project setting. Remember, that is the gear down here. And we can choose our pixel aspect ratio in here, and that will hit every single clip. But in the few rogue cases where you might just have one or two clips from a different camera, you can change them individually by selecting the clip, going to this attributes menu and changing it on this drop down. We also have image horizontal and vertical flip, fairly self-explanatory. Orientation is rotation, and input sizing preset. We don't really need to worry about this one. Next, we have field dominance and de-interlace, and this is for when we're working with interlaced footage. Now, I almost always work with progressive. It's what my clients shoot, and it's what they deliver to me. But there are times, especially for either broadcast work or if we're working with a lot of archive footage, when you're going to be using interlaced footage, and these settings can help clear up any issues you're having. We also have our alpha settings here. Resolve used to be a little finicky about using alpha mats, and we used to have to set up separate files containing alpha channels. Now we can input footage with RGB and alpha channels and use this dialog to interpret the alpha correctly. Finally, on this tab of the attributes window, we have super scaling, and this is a seriously impressive feature. It allows us to algorithmically upscale footage to a higher resolution. We set up our upscale using the first drop-down window, so 2 times, 3 times or 4 times current resolution, and then we set our sharpness and noise reduction in the next 2, and we mix and match until we are happy. Now, this can be extremely taxing on your machine, and you use it if you have a reason to use it. Mainly if we're working with archive footage that was shot in SD or HD and we need to bring it up to a modern resolution. That's the main use case for this. Or if we're using a B camera that can't shoot 4K, for example, maybe we've got, I don't know, an old GoPro that can't shoot 4K or something along those lines. We would use super scaling for that. But it's going to take a great big toll on your graphics card, so if you're not using a really good desktop, I would steer well clear of this one. Now there's one more thing to look at here that's going to have a direct impact on our grading workflow, and that is timecode. So I'm going to choose the timecode tab at the top of this window. This can be a knotty one because there's a minor issue that crops up on almost every project. Resolve timelines start at a timecode of 1 hour, and a lot of people don't respect this when they export, and their exported files contain what we call a 0 start timecode, when the first frame starts on 0 and not on 1 hour. This causes issues with one of the first steps of establishing a project within Resolve if left unnoticed. Now, I don't advise that you go into your project settings and set the timecode to start at 0. Starting at 1 hour is standard practice, and we will go over the reason for that when we discuss delivery to broadcast much later in this course. We'll come back to this and fix it when we go over the Conform in the next module. For now, I just want you to know that this option is right here. So this has been a good overview of the Clip Attributes window. We're ready to go on into the Conform now. So click on through to the next lecture once you're ready. Before we go any further, we're going to take a quick look at the Master Project Settings tab. This is important, as this is where we're going to look if we have something fundamentally wrong with our project, like the frame rate, a pixel aspect ratio, or project resolution. Now, there are a lot of tabs on this window, and we'll go through each of these as they become relevant to our work. But for now, we are only going to focus on the basic Master Project Settings. In order to bring this up, there's a little gear icon in the very bottom right of the screen. We click that, and then this comes up here. This is the settings window, and by default the master settings will already be open. So let's start taking a look. The first little window here is the timeline format window. This allows us to set our timeline resolution, which can be changed at any point during the project, but it is best to get it right at the start. I can change the resolution of my timelines by using the drop-down menu right here, and new timelines that I create from now on will adopt this resolution. We can change every individual timeline's resolution separately though, so you don't need to worry about being locked into anything at this point. In most projects, you will be using a standard 16:9 aspect ratio unless you have a project for a cinema delivery. Below this, we have the pixel aspect ratio settings. We're going to leave these at square for every one of our projects. These are for specific delivery scenarios, like to cinema or to some special delivery destination that doesn't take standard square pixels. Most of these projects that you will be working on are meant for web, so we are going to stay with square pixels for this one. Below this, we have timeline frame rate and playback frame rate, and these are important. It used to be that Resolve wanted you to get these right before you even imported any footage, and there's an element of that left over today, but it is now much more flexible. I can use this drop down here to choose any frame rate I like. In most cases throughout this course, we will be using a 25 frames per second frame rate. Like I said, it used to be Resolve kind of stuck you with the first frame rate you imported. Now we can change that individually on each timeline, so it is much more flexible. One thing that you need to worry about though, one thing that you must keep in mind, is that when you first import an item and it's not 24 frames per second, Resolve will ask you whether or not you want to change your project to match this new frame rate. If you're bringing material in with an odd frame rate, like 30 or 60 frames per second or 29.976, and that's the first thing that you imported, you might find that your timelines have a frame rate that doesn't fit most of your footage, so you just need to keep an eye out for this setting here. Below these two drop-down menus, we have Enable Video Field Processing. This is used for interlaced video projects. All of the material I'm providing you with is progressive, so we will not be using this. The rest of this window will be covered if and when it becomes practically relevant to the projects we're going to be tackling in this course. But for now, we have what we need to get started. Now that we've got an understanding of what's going on in the Master Settings tab, we can go right ahead and begin our first conform. Click on through to the next lecture once you're ready. Okay, so let's get started on the baked master. You've got the downloaded short sequence file, and this is what you will be using for the baked master demonstration. Now, I'm in Premiere Pro right now. You don't need to worry about that. You're not expected to follow along with anything in Premiere Pro in this lecture. Soon enough, we'll be back in DaVinci Resolve and you follow along from there. All I'm doing here is showing you how a baked master is exported from another piece of software. So I've got a basic edit down here, and it's all cuts taken from different rushes, and we need an easy way of getting our edit into DaVinci Resolve so it can be graded. And the baked master is how we do this for short form content. As I keep saying, and as I will say again, about 15 minutes and under is ideal for the baked master workflow. So there are a few things to do in preparation for this. I've gotten rid of any overlaid graphics and any, subtitles, picture-in-picture, anything that would otherwise be on top of the picture edit and that may interfere with the grade. So I want to get rid of titles, I want to get rid of credits, all that kind of thing for the baked master workflow. And I've done that, and I've got a clean edit, which is now ready for export. So, and this is not about using Premiere Pro. So I'm just going to go into the export window, and what I want is QuickTime video 422HQ, and in 99% of cases that's what you want to use for an export. If your client requests the DNX codecs, they are in here as well, DNX HR and HD. But 422HQ is absolutely fine. This was shot in 10-bit ProRes on a Blackmagic Cinecam, so rendering it out in 12-bit isn't going to do anything, isn't going to give me anything else to work with. If it was shot on an Arri Alexa, I would definitely want to be using ProRes 4444 or XQ for this, your choice really. But that's only really justifiable with something that's shot in 12-bit. So Apple ProRes 422HQ, all the other stuff is just default, and I will call this my short sequence demo render, and I want to define my export. And I have a space in my deliverables folder just for this file. I will save it in there, and then I will export. And it does not take long. So with this done, we can now move over to DaVinci Resolve. So now we're back in Resolve, and from this point forwards, I want you to follow along with the demonstration using the short sequence file that you have downloaded. So I'm going to locate my version of the file, which is up here in the file finder, and I've just put it in its own folder for now, nothing too complicated. So what we need to do is cut this back up into its constituent edits so that we can work on each edit separately in the color page, because we cannot just work on a single file and have Resolve work it all out for us. We need to identify where the edits are, and that's what we're going to do. Now the first thing I want to do is make a bin, and that's either right-click and choose the option, or Control or Command Shift and the letter N, and I'm going to call this bin Scene Cut, and then I will select it down here. The dark background means it is currently selected, because this is where I want our footage to end up once I've finished our scene cut operation. So now I want to open the scene cut detector tool whilst the footage is still up here in the file finder. I do not want to bring it down into the media pool. I do not want to drag it down. I'm going to right click or command click on it, or control click even. It's been a long time since I've used Mac, and choose Scene Cut Detection. This is the option we want. So again, whilst it's still up here, we do not want it in the media pool. Whilst it's still up here, right or control click Scene Cut Detection. That's what we're looking for. And this will open up the Scene Cut Detector interface. So we've got a few things going on here, so let's just break it down and take a look at what we are dealing with. First, up here we have a monitor, in many ways similar to the monitor we've dealt with beforehand in the media panel. Then down below we have a timeline. Now, the key thing in this timeline is that it's where our edits are going to show up. You may notice that it's blank at the moment, but as edit decisions get made, green spikes are going to start showing up on this timeline, and they're going to tell us where the edits are, and Resolve will use them to cut this file back up into edits. So let's just get back into the right place. So let's take a look at actually doing this. Now, before I start, I want to pay attention to this shocking pink line down here on the timeline. This is the confidence threshold for the scene cut detector. Essentially, it's a kind of percentile measure of how confident DaVinci Resolve is that it's found an edit, and if it passes that threshold, then it counts, and if it does not pass that threshold, it does not count. When we start to place edits down, it will make a lot more sense, but typically, I like to kind of start by dragging this down to be about a third of the way up, which is pretty close to its default position. Without any kind of extraordinary lighting circumstances, like a nightclub or fireworks or what have you, this is a pretty good place to start. And I'm just going to scrub back into place. So, the monitor. How exactly is Resolve finding the edits in our footage? What it's doing is it's comparing pairs of frames together, and when one frame is very, very different from the next frame on the timeline, Resolve believes that an edit has been made. You'll see here we have a central monitor, and then we have a left and a right monitor. The central monitor, the big one, is our current frame under the playhead. The leftmost monitor is our previous frame, one frame back on the timeline, and the rightmost monitor is the next frame, one frame forwards on the timeline. And what we're looking for is that the center and right monitors are obviously from the same shot. Same location, same subject, obviously from the same shot. And that the leftmost monitor is very obviously from a different shot entirely. When we see that this is true, that the current frame and the previous frame are clearly from different shots, we are on the first frame of an edit. And this is where Resolve is going to place one of those green spikes down that we saw earlier. It's going to look at how different the two frames are and make a judgment based on how different they are. Down here on the timeline, it's going to place a green spike down. And it's going to make a lot more sense when we see this actually happening. But for now, what we want to know is center frame, rightmost frame, same shot, left frame, different. Now, all we really need to do to get this started is hit the Auto Scene Detect button in the lower left. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. And Resolve is going to go through, and I'll just come back to the first one, and Resolve is going to go through and place these green spikes of varying height on our timeline. Now, we talked about the confidence threshold beforehand. If I drag this confidence threshold up, you'll see what was green goes grey as it falls beneath because it's not meeting the confidence threshold. If I've got footage with a lot of difficult lighting in it, then dragging the confidence threshold up can help eliminate some erroneous edits. But in this case, I do not need to do that. So now that I've got my first pass at my Auto Scene Detect operation, I need to go through and manually proof check every single one of these green edits. I need to make sure that they're correct, because if they're not, the wrong stuff is going to get on the timeline, the grade will change partway through a shot, or will grade two totally different shots with the same grade. All kinds of nonsense can occur. So we need to proof check what Resolve has done for us, and that's very easy to do. On the right-hand side of the timeline, we have the cut list, and this lists all of these green edit points. It gives them a number, it tells us which frame they're on, and it gives us the corresponding time code on the file as well. And if I left click on one of these, Resolve will jump to that edit. And what I want to do is I want to check each and every one of these edits and make sure, like we said before, that the center monitor and the rightmost monitor are obviously from the same shot, and that the leftmost monitor is obviously from a different shot. And in this case, that is correct. The center and the right are obviously the same shot, and the left is different. Therefore, this is the first frame of an edit, and Resolve's judgment here is correct. If it's correct, I can just click down to the next one, or I can hit the down arrow key and jump to the next edit point on the timeline. Now, if I left click off of the cut list anywhere, and I use the up and down keys, they don't work. I need to click back onto the cut list for the arrow shortcuts to work. And down is the next cut point, up is the previous one. I've used a lot of different names for these green spikes. The technically correct name is edit point. So we can go to the next edit point and check, and lo and behold, center and right the same, left different. Next one, that's also correct. And we just go through and check all of these edits. And this is mandatory. You can't just leave it to its own devices because it's only about 80% accurate when it does this, which is good, but not good enough to be left alone. So we've gone through now and we've found that all of these edits are correct. And this is obviously a very basic exercise. I'm not going to throw you anything too challenging right away. But we will take a look at how to correct any mistakes that may have taken place down here before we move on, because in a real-world project you're going to have to fix a few false edits, you're going to have to add a few missing edits in as well. So first, let's go to removing a bad edit. I'm just going to quickly add a false edit point in here. So, for argument's sake, Resolve has made a mistake here. I've got a great big green spike where there should not be one, and this just cuts the shot in half. And if I go ahead and grade like this, if I have to track the vignettes or keyframe anything, it's going to cause all kinds of nonsense. So we want to fix this here and now. That's extremely easy to do. I place the playhead over the offending edit, and in the lower left, there's a delete button. I simply left click that. It will delete the current edit point and skip us on to the next edit point in the timeline, where we can either say, no, that's wrong, and delete again, or in this case, it is correct. I will click back to the next one in the cut list, and from this point forwards, my arrow keys are active again, and I can quickly go through and proof check my file, my edit, I should say. So that's how we remove a bad edit. We just place it over the offending edit, hit delete. Now, if we find that an edit has gone missing, or it has not spotted an edit, we need to manually place an edit point into the timeline ourselves. And we do that by finding the right frame, and the left and right arrow keys will allow us to move forwards and backwards by one frame. And I want to find the first frame of the edit, and next to delete we have an add button, and we simply left click that. And that will place a very high but not 100% edit point on our scene cut timeline. And that's it, that's all we need to do. For a short file like this, super easy. I would recommend that you not use the scene cut detector for anything longer than 15 minutes. After that, I would genuinely recommend either an XML or an AAF workflow. But for short form, corporate, 7 or 8 minute YouTube video, a short film for festivals, they can be very useful. I use this on corporate for web all the time. So once we have all of this done and proof checked, I just want to hit Add Cuts to Media Pool. Nothing appears to change. In the upper left there is an X. I will left click that. And here we have all of our footage in our bin. And the great thing about this is that when we do this, it comes in chronological order. So the edit is intact. All of these shots going from left to right are in the correct order. So we just need to drop them onto a timeline, which we will do in a second. I just want to show you that if you close the scene cut detector, you can open it back up again. And on that clip, it will remember. And it will remember until you close Resolve. It won't get saved if you save the project. In the upper right, we have a menu icon, the kind of 3 dots. And we can save a scene cut if we want to as a separate file, and then load a separate scene cut file later on. Limited application for that, really. I've never used that feature, but it is there. but I just want to show you that it will remember until you close Resolve down. Then even if you've saved the project after doing this, when you go back in, this will be gone, unless you saved it up here, in which case you'll have to then manually re-import it again afterwards. So we've performed our scene cut operation. What I want to do now is populate a timeline with these clips, and that's very easy to do. I want to right-click the bin and choose Create New Timeline using selected bin. And I will call this Short Sequence, one video track, audio doesn't matter at the moment, there's no audio, and hit Create. And now I want to left-click and drag my new timeline just up onto the master bin. I don't want to keep my timelines and my footage together because they can just get lost that way. Timelines can very easily get lost in large bins full of footage. So on the master, I've got my short sequence, and now if I go into the edit panel, or indeed the color panel, I've got a populated timeline, and I'll just close my effects window. I've got a populated timeline full of footage ready to be worked on. So this is a really good workflow for short form projects, and especially projects for web. Have a go at doing this, and in the next lecture we will be taking a look at the XML workflow. So click on through to the next lecture once you're ready. Okay, so let's get started with our XML round trip. This first lecture is primarily going to focus on what we call the pre-grade, which is cleaning up the offline edit, and the exporting of an offline reference file, which we are going to need later on. So first, let's tidy this up. We have a fairly messy edit here with buried clips and some things floating around. Ideally, what I want to do is I want to try and bring this edit down to a maximum of 2 timelines. Now, what we've got here does not conform to any kind of logical sequence. It's simply just a set of brushes kind of cobbled together. So we're not looking at a coherent edit here. This is simply for demonstration purposes. And if I go through and take a look at what we've got some cutaways, and then we have some stuff on a higher track, and we've got plenty of buried clips. Now, a buried clip is something like this down here. It's underneath another clip on the timeline, and that can actually make navigation issues within Resolve. So it's good practice to try and get rid of these overlaps unless they are necessary for some kind of blend effect, a transition from one into the other, for example. So let's start tidying this up. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to trim this in, and then I'm going to bring this down here. I'm also going to trim this clip, and I can then bring this one down. Notice I'm trimming the video here. I don't want to interfere with the audio too much if I can help that. So, unless I need all of these things to overlap, I'm going to try and get rid of as much as I can and just make this neater and more tidy. I can leave these clips here on top if I like. There's no practical purpose for the picture to overlap, so I am just going to trim these down. And then let's say, for argument's sake, there's a practical purpose for this. Maybe there's going to be a picture-in-picture or something. I can leave this as it is. If there's a reason for this overlap, that can be okay. So that's a very basic look at a pre-grade. We basically want to bring our video down to 2 tracks, and then we're going to keep track 3 and higher clear for things like graphics, black bars, overlays, credits, what have you. So we don't want any of those elements coming down here because we want to turn the higher tracks off before we export this. We don't want titles, we don't want subtitles, we don't want graphics interfering with our grade. So I'm going to deactivate these higher tracks at this point. So I've done my basic cleanup here. the next thing I want to do is I want to export an offline reference file. Now, an offline reference file in Form appears similar to a baked master file, but its function is completely different. We do not grade with an offline reference file, so it is okay to export it with a more lossy codec like H.264 or H.265. We actually don't want the offline reference to be too heavy or take up too much space. So I'm going to export a H.264 render. My Control-M shortcut refusing to work because Adobe is marvelous. So where it says QuickTime, I'm going to choose H.264. I'm going to make sure that the video is on match source. And then that's all I'm really bothered about. Really all I'm looking for here is a visual reference to make sure that the edit is correct later on, and we will go through that in the next few lectures. I'm going to click here and I'm going to give it a name, and I am going to call it demo underscore offline. Oops, typing with one hand is a little bit awkward. Demo underscore offline in block capitals, because this is the demo project and it is an offline reference file. Always clearly name your offline reference files. You don't want them to be confused for anything else because they are made with very lossy, low quality codecs to save space. Okay? I'm going to hit save and I will export this. Now that we have our offline reference file exported, we need to export our XML also. So in order to do that, with the correct timeline open, I'm going to go to File, Export, Final Cut Pro XML. And then I need to choose where I save it, and I need to give it a name. So I'm going to call this one Demo XML, and let's spell demo correctly. Typing with one hand is awkward. Now, in order to hand an XML and a project over to somebody else, you must give them the offline reference file, the XML, and the footage with which you have been editing. Without those three things, this is not going to work. The XML does not contain any footage itself. It is simply a text document. It is a text document that describes our edit. Resolve reads it and reconstructs the timeline edit by edit based on what it finds. Okay? So in order for an XML conform to work, you must have the offline reference file because you need a basis for comparison. You must have the XML itself, unsurprisingly, and you must have the appropriate footage for the project. Okay, I'm going to save this XML here, and now we are done with this part of the demonstration. In the next lecture, what we will do is we will look at setting up bins and importing our footage properly for the Conform. So, click on through to the next lecture once you're ready. Okay. In this lecture, we're going to bring all of our footage into Resolve. We're going to correctly import our offline reference file because there is a specific way of doing that. And we're going to take a look at a little bit of organization, and then we will import the XML file itself. In the next lecture, we will proceed to proof check it and make sure that it is, in fact, okay. So let's start by making some bins. I want to make a new bin for rushes. I want to make a new bin for timelines. And I want to make a new bin for the offline reference file as well. And I'm just going to call that bin offline. So first I'm going to bring my rushes in. I can do this easily by selecting the 3 day 1, day 2, day 3 folders by either Control or Shift clicking, and with all 3 of them selected I can right click any one of them and choose Add Folder and Subfolders into Media Pool. It's asking me if I want to change the frame rate. I'm going to say yes, change, because it does need to change from 24 FPS as per usual. This option that we've just chosen here, Add Folder and Subfolders into Media Pool, will look inside the folder on our machine and bring in every video and audio file that Resolve can understand. Then it will look inside all folders inside those folders and do the same thing, and look inside all folders inside those folders, etc. It will find every item that Resolve can recognize and bring it into Resolve, into the bin we currently have active. Now, alternatively, if I want to keep these folders intact and make bins out of them, I can right-click selected folders, and I can hit here, Add Folder and Subfolders into Media Pool, brackets, Create Bins. This will then add a bin with the same name as each folder with the appropriate things contained within. This is a good way to handle larger and more complex projects like feature films and serial length and documentaries and the like. So I generally tend to like doing this. So again, I right-click selected bins and choose Add Folder and Subfolders into Media Pool, brackets, Create Bins. If there are any folders within those folders, they will be made into bins of their own as well, and you can use the bin list on the left-hand side to navigate through all of those. So we now have our rushes in our media pool. We now need to bring our offline reference in, and we can't just bring an offline clip in normally. That's not how it works. I'm going to go to the offline bin, and then I need to find my offline reference clip, which in this case is called demo_offline in block capitals .mp4, and I need to right click this and choose Add as Offline Reference Clip. I need to do that whilst it's still up here. If I bring it down here, too late. So right click, Add as Offline Reference Clip. You will know that this is correct because this little black and white checkerboard will appear on the thumbnail. So we've now got our rushes, we've got our offline, we need to bring in the XML file next, and we do that in the Edit panel. So we need to click on the Edit panel and open it up. Make sure that the media pool is exposed. If it is not, and you see this screen, hit the media pool icon in the upper left to expose it, and make sure we have our timeline bin open. In the empty space in here, I'm going to right click and go to Timelines, Import AAF/EDL/XML, and the keyboard shortcut for that is Control or Command, Shift, and the letter I. And this will then ask me where to find this. And I just need to navigate to where I keep the XML, select it, and hit Open. And I get this window. So this window is the Load XML window, and it allows us to set some boundaries when we are bringing the XML file into Resolve. It's going to let me name the timeline, so I'm going to call this one Demo Timeline, and then we have some checkboxes down here. We have a drop-down menu up here. Sometimes XMLs can contain multiple timelines, and because of this, always give your timelines logical names. I've had a lot of projects from people who have had 7 or 8 different timelines, all called Final Edit, and it's just not very helpful. So we know this is the correct timeline because there's just one of them. I'm going to give it a better name. And then we have these checkboxes down here. Now I'm going to leave automatically set project settings and use sizing information checked. But I'm going to ignore automatically import source clips into Media Pool. We've already imported our material into Resolve, and that's a much better way of doing it. It gives us more control. It lets us tell Resolve exactly where to look. We can ban it from certain bins if we're getting conforming errors. Okay, so this is a much better way to do this. I like to bring everything in bins and then uncheck this. We can automatically import source clips into Media Pool, but because this project was originated on a different machine, it won't find them and it will ask you to relink them. This is a much better workflow, so we will stick with this for the time being. Once I have all of this here and it is correct, I will hit OK. It's now going to ask me which folders it's allowed to look in. So I'm going to hit the little chevron, the little arrow here. I'm going to unfurl rushes. I'm going to uncheck master, which will uncheck every other bin. And I'm just going to put a check in the rushes bins. I'm going to tell Resolve you're only allowed to look in here. Okay? This is why bringing everything else in first is a much better way to do this. And then I'm going to hit OK. And now Resolve has reconstructed my timeline. We can go ahead and we can start to proof check the conform we've got. Because this conform is not been signed off on yet, we need to make sure that everything is correct and in the correct place according to our offline reference file. And we will do that in the next lecture. So we're almost there now. So go ahead and click on through to the next lecture once you're ready. Okay, so this is the final step of the conform before the proper grade starts. So let's go through this and let's get it proof checked so we can move on. Now we have our conformed edit down here, but we need to be able to check it. So what we need to do is we need to open up our timelines bin. Now up there, we made our XML timeline. It's got a little XML symbol next to it. That shows us it was made from an XML. And we need to right click and go to Timelines, Link Offline Reference Clip. And then we need to choose demo_offline.mp4. So we have to right click the timeline in here, Timelines, Link Offline Reference Clip, and then demo_offline. We need to left click on this, and that will link our offline reference to our current timeline. Now, nothing appears to have changed. What we need to do on this left viewer here, this is our source monitor in the edit panel. We need to click this little film strip icon and choose the offline symbol. We need to choose the checkerboard symbol. Once we do that, we then have two of the same image. So let's go over just what we're seeing here. What we have in the left here is the source viewer. It's showing us the current frame of the offline file according to the time code in the timeline down below. And the right hand side is the program viewer. It is showing us the frame currently underneath the playhead down below on the timeline. Now, in order for our conform to be correct, both of these viewers must be the same. What that then tells us is that the edit we have down here is in fact the same as the edit that we have in our offline reference file. That is the purpose of the offline reference file. We don't grade with it, we don't edit with it. It is only here to allow us to make certain that the edit we have down here is in fact correct. So what we need to do is we need to go through and check our edit and make sure that everything is the same throughout. Now the easiest way to do this is to hit the down arrow key, and that will jump us to the next edit point, the next point between two items on the timeline. And we then want to make sure that the first frame of every cut is the same as our offline reference file. And we go through and keep checking until we reach the end. Now, this is a very simple conform and nothing's gone wrong, but let's take a quick look at swapping a clip out just in case we have some conform errors. Later on, we have two practical projects which use the XML round trip. One is fairly simple, and the second deliberately goes quite wrong, and you have to fix that conform. But there's time to get that right later. We're just going to take a look at how we swap out a clip down here now, and we'll take a look at troubleshooting another common problem with the offline reference file. So if I want to swap this clip out for something else, let's say for argument's sake this clip is incorrect, I can find another clip in my media pool up here, and I left click on this clip to select it. It is selected if it has an orange outline. I then right click on this clip down here in the timeline, and I choose Conform Lock with Media Pool Clip. What that will do is it will take the I/O, the in-out range of this edit, apply it to the clip I have selected up here, and then replace it on the timeline with the clip I have selected in the media pool. This allows me to easily switch this clip out with any other that I have in the media pool, provided that the other clip is actually long enough to fill this edit. And this allows me to fix conform errors quite easily. And you will go over how to do that in much more detail in a later practical project. So now, what I've got here is an edit which is identical to its offline reference file. If this were a real project and not simply a demonstration of the XML round trip, I could begin grading. I would just hit the color button and I can start to work on these clips. However, we are not grading any of this material. It is all H.264, simply to make a smaller download. The next thing you're going to grade will be the short sequence in the following module on primary grading. So this covers how to get a project into Resolve using an XML file. It does have the possibility of going wrong, but we will cover troubleshooting with this workflow later on. For now, we're pretty much done with the XML round trip. Up next is a short demonstration of the AAF, and after that you can finally get along with grading the short sequence. So click on through to the next lecture once you're ready. So, onto the Avid version of this workflow. Now, this can go all kinds of wrong, so you'll need to set up your edit in Avid in a very specific manner. The first thing to note is that Avid actually has two ways of bringing assets into a project. There's the standard import, which we're not going to use in this lecture, and then there's the AMA link, and this is what we're going to use in this lecture in order to make sure that we can relink all our media back in Resolve. Now, this is not an Avid course. If you're editing in Avid, I'm going to assume that you already know how to navigate it. So we'll stick to the bits which are relevant to bringing a project into Resolve. And remember, we have to take care of our metadata before we cut the project together. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my media in through an AMA link, and it's just the day 1, 2, 3 from the XML demo footage folder that we're using here. I'm going to select those folders and hit link. And here I have my material. Now there's a bit of housekeeping I'm going to have to do before I can start to edit. And the first thing I need to do is I need to add a custom column, and I'm going to call it backup file name. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to back up the original file names of the clips here into this backup file name column. That way, when these clips are synced with their audio, we don't have any risk of losing the original file names, which is something we're going to have to keep somewhere in order for the AMA to work, because we need to know what the actual files are called. It's no good if we change the name and it's now called something else. The AAF could wind up looking for that fictional file name that doesn't actually correlate to anything on our drive. So by doing this, we make sure that no matter what, we always have a backup of the original file name that we can use during the relink, no matter what else we do to the clip. So in order to do this, I'm going to left click on the name column, and that's actually on the word name up here to highlight everything in this metadata column. And then I'm going to hit edit and duplicate. And I'm going to duplicate that into the backup file name column. So in this select dialog, I'm going to select backup file name, and I'm going to hit OK. And now you'll see that I've got my original file names backed up in the backup file name column here. Now that's the first thing I need to do. I do also need to do something else before I can start editing. So down here, I'm going to scroll along until I can find the start column, and this contains the start time code for all of these clips. I'm going to drag this back along so it's a bit closer up to name and I can see it. Now I'm going to duplicate start into a separate metadata column, so then we also have the start time code of all of these video files backed up. So that way, if anything changes, if they become the Avid equivalent of a compound clip, or if I start to make subclips from them, I can still always go into the start column here, and then I have the original correct time code to reference during the relink back in Resolve using the AAF. So now I've clicked on the word start to select that metadata column. I'm going to hit edit, duplicate, and I'm going to duplicate that into auxiliary TC2, which is auxiliary timecode 2, and then hit OK. So I've now got my original file names backed up in my backup file name column, and I've got my original start timecode backed up in my auxiliary timecode 2 column. At this point, I can now begin my edit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just put a few clips down on the timeline. So here we have just a few random clips with a few random IO points just put down on the timeline. It's not a real edit, it's just for the sake of this demonstration. Now, before I actually start doing anything to this timeline, I'm obviously going to want to duplicate it, so I have an original version of the edit that I can always go back to. Now, doing this can actually be quite counterintuitive. Within Avid, it took me a while to find out how to do it the first time around. Over here in the right-hand side, this is our program viewer. It shows us what's going on the timeline. I need to right-click in here and choose Duplicate, and that will duplicate the sequence. And now I'm going to make my adjustments within this duplicated sequence. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to get rid of any overlap, and then I'm actually just going to go straight up and delete the audio, because we've got the original audio from the other timeline still there, but I don't need any audio for the grade. So now I have my timeline with its pre-grade performed, and I now have to export my offline reference file. And doing this in Avid again is not the most intuitive thing in the world. So I've got this duplicate sequence open up here. I'm going to go to File, Output, and Export to File. And what I'm actually going to do is hit Options, and where it says AAF here, by default I'm going to choose QuickTime Movie. So I'm going to check video only because I don't need any audio. Native dimensions is absolutely fine. Keep as legal range is fine. I'm not going to do any scaling here, I'm going to keep it the way it is. And then I'm going to hit Format Options. And under Settings, I'm going to choose Compression Type. You'll have by default, your compression type will be animation. I am going to go down and choose H.264. I'm going to choose Faster Encode, Medium. Frame rate is current. Keyframe, I'll keep all that the same. It's just a basic reference file, so it doesn't need to any hardcore kind of compression going on. So this is now okay. These are correct settings. It's going to create just a standard H.264 codec QuickTime file that I can then use as an offline reference file. And then I'm going to use this as my pre-graded AAF offline reference file. So I'm just going to call it that. So I'm going to make a new folder and I'm going to save it in here so I know where to find it later. And when I hit save, it's just going to go ahead and it's going to export just like in any other program. And that's absolutely fine. So now that that's done, I've got my offline done, I've got my pre-grade done. The next step is for me to actually export the AAF file. So I've got my sequence highlighted. I'm going to go to File, Output, Export to File again. This time I'm going to hit Options, and where it says QuickTime Movie, I'm going to go to double AF, and I'm going to make sure that I have the correct settings. So I want include all video data tracks. I'm not bothered about audio tracks. Export method link, because I'm not transcoding anything, I'm not copying or consolidating anything, I'm going to leave it at link. You can choose copy media and consolidate media if you want to trim the media down, or if you want to move the media to a different location along with an AAF if you're handing over. That can be quite effective. I don't have any video effects, and I'm not transcoding anything at all. So now this is going to spit out an AAF text document that's going to make reference to the footage that I have used to edit this software, just like an XML would, except it doesn't carry over as much information as an XML. So I'm going to hit save, and then I'm just going to give it a file name. Then I'm just going to save it, and then I've got another sequence up here. So now we're okay, and we're going to take our project through to resolve in the next lecture. So click on through once you're ready. Now that we have a working AAF, we can bring our edit through to resolve. Now, exactly like the XML workflow, we can proceed in two ways. We can manually import and organize our footage before we import the AAF, or we can leave it up to the AAF to bring everything in automatically. As always, I strongly advise bringing everything in and organizing everything before importing either the AAF or the XML. So I'll just get that done quickly. So here's my stuff. I'll just put it in a bin for now. So I've got the footage in here, and now I can import the AAF. So I'm going to go to the edit panel, and just like last time, I'm going to right click and choose Timelines, Import AAF/EDL/XML. Then I'm going to navigate to the AAF demo folder, and then import the AAF demo that I made. And now you'll see this is just like importing an XML. In fact, the load AAF window is very, very similar to the load XML window. So AAF demo, I'm just going to call that AAF demo reconform. I'm not going to automatically import source clips into the media pool because I've already got them here. I'm not relinking to source camera files because it was already linked to the original media anyway. And I can choose to use sizing information to bring the pan and scan over. You couldn't do that with AAFs. They always didn't bring the pan and scan over. So now I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to navigate to the rushes folder, and there I've got my conform. And of course we need to link our offline reference file to this just like we did last time. So I'm going to go into the AAF demo. And here I've got my offline. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to add into media pool as offline reference clip. And there it is with a little offline checkerboard as well. Then I'm going to right click my timeline and go to Timelines, link offline reference clip, and then choose the relevant offline. And then we're going to do our usual thing we did throughout the XML. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to check every edit and make sure that the two match up perfectly. So this is how you get an AAF into Resolve. It's pretty similar like an XML these days. There used to be a few extra limitations, but they appear to have been addressed now. So later on in the course, once we've done some grading, we're going to come back to this and how we get our project back into Avid. So click on through to the next lecture once you're ready.